So before I start, I'll quickly explain some background to the project. I work for BBC Global News. This is the advertising-funded arm of BBC News, which, because of the advertising, operates outside of the UK. We broadcast the news channel, BBC World News, which has around 70 million weekly viewers, and BBC.com, which has some 56 million monthly users and a rapidly increasing 26 million mobile users. Naturally, we're trying to attract more audiences to consume BBC News on all devices and to increase the numbers who use more than one platform for this. And over the last 2 years, we've been worrying about, among other things, the rapid rise of tablets and the disruptive impact they might have on news consumption patterns. This project was launched to answer that question and many others. The project was conducted for the BBC by Insights Consulting, who eventually delivered a 120-slide debrief, because they had lots to tell us. But this is very much an overview, condensed to just a couple of dozen slides. Okay, looking at the methodology. Initially, we set up an online closed community of about 200 consumers from 9 countries. And for those of you not very good at your flags, that's the US, France, Germany, Poland, the United Arab Emirates, South Africa, India, Singapore, and Australia. Now, I hadn't used a closed online community before, and I strongly recommend it because you get so much out of respondents, and they basically conduct the research for you. So in the first week, we set community members individual tasks relating to their own news consumption, which they were given a day or two to complete, so that it fitted naturally around their lives. And basically, respondents were blogging about their news habits, and generally on a daily basis. In the second week, respondents had warmed up, and they were brought together to complete group tasks and discussions. And basically, we ran a series of rolling focus groups with members joining and leaving naturally, so that the situation was quite unforced. By the third week, members had lost their inhibitions and a real community developed. The community was very much focused on the future of news consumption with minimal moderation from us. And this threw up some great insights that we might not have found if we had led the discussions. So ethnography is obviously a very powerful research tool, but particularly if it's conducted by the respondents themselves, so removing the artificial context of much qualitative research. We subsequently tested these insights and quantified them through 3,600 completed online questionnaires in the same 9 countries. Now, I should add that we split the sample 50-50 between those who own tablets and those who don't, to determine the impact on news consumption of the rapid emergence of tablets in our market. Are they a threat or an opportunity to news organisations? Now, the respondents who took part in our research were all from the most affluent 20% of households in the country, because that's broadly our target audience, or specifically, it's broadly the target audience of our advertisers. Now, affluents differ from the general population in that they tend to be far more interested in the news than the general population, and this tendency is the same in all countries. The global affluent class, if you like, tends to share common attitudes and lifestyles that they do not necessarily share with the general populations of their own countries. Now, globally, 81% of affluent consumers, although I saw yesterday that it had risen to 84% in the latest GWI release, agree that it's important to stay in touch with what's going on in the world, and only 4% disagree. This is much higher than the less affluent consumers. Now, specifically, our research estimated that affluent consumers globally spent between 2 and 3 hours a day consuming the news. And that's a surprisingly high figure, even if you accept that it includes sports news and celebrity news, for which many people's demand is seemingly insatiable. We did worry that news was a slowly declining interest globally, that it would be the older demographics who watched the news and that the young had other concerns. So it was very gratifying that the greatest consumers of news are the 25 to 34-year-old age group. So that secures our market for years to come. In terms of the type of news consumed, respondents in all 9 countries rated national, international and local news of equal importance. So I guess it's a recognition of the interdependence of the world today, perhaps. So this research shows us how each device fits into the news environment. So 2/3 of respondents use different devices for different ways of consuming the news. It is no longer a linear relationship governed by time of day. Each device is used to an extent concurrently and independently throughout the day. The question then is what drives the choice of device to use and at what point? Well, these are the main drivers ranked by importance in driving device usage. So top is where respondents are trying to, or basically, is where respondents are and in which physical environment. And secondly, what they're actually trying to achieve by accessing news at that point. The third and fourth factors will relate to the fact that users are habitual in their behaviour. It's a human trait, so time of day and routines are very big influences on the device used. But the biggest surprise for us was that the least important driver is the type of news that's being consumed. And kind of this meant for the BBC, from our perspective, it means we should give consumers access to all categories of news and all formats of news content, no matter what device they're using. Because consumers are always connected. The device mix varies throughout the day, but consumers access news using all of them. Obviously, our biggest interest lay in comparing the device mix for tablet users with non-tablet users to determine the disruptive impact on the other devices of the huge uptake in tablet ownership. So for TV, which is shown by the green line, it's still the dominant platform at the peaks, particularly in the evening. So it's still the norm in most countries to sit down and watch the 8 o'clock news, 9 o'clock news, 10 o'clock news, whatever it is in that particular country. But tablets, shown by the orange bar, are increasingly the number 2 device for evening prime time news consumption. But rather than cannibalising TV news, kind of which BBC as a big TV channel operator had feared, they do seem to be increasingly used in conjunction with TV. Tablets and TV are basically the perfect complementary devices for news consumption. So laptops, shown by the dark blue bar, and mobile, turquoise, are dominant throughout the day, but laptop and PC usage was clearly declining amongst tablet owners, quickly replaced by tablets themselves and by phones. So TV is still king, but only just, with 58% of news consumption globally now being digital. 29% being on desktop or laptop, 18% on mobile, 10% globally amongst being on tablets, although double that amongst tablet owners. And here we found clear differences between developed and developing markets. So in South Africa, for example, TV accounts for just 35% of news consumption, while mobile accounts for over 20%, as it does also in India. And globally, mobile accounts for 18% of news consumption, but less than that at the moment in most developed markets, although rapidly increasing. As I said, we had expected the research to show that TV was a dying platform for news. But on the contrary, news users are actually more likely to be watching more now rather than less, and actually most expect to watch the same amount in 5 years' time, with 32% expecting to watch more. And this kind of backs up some recent research by the IAB in Europe, which kind of looking more broadly at news, TV consumption beyond just news, show that there had been an increase in TV consumption across the continent. Now, in news, this seems to be down to the complementary roles of TV and tablets. And I'll caveat that, and that assumes that the news provider supplies news with cross-platform usage in mind and a recognition of the different roles that each device plays. So TV's role is very much about curating the news, kind of explaining to consumers what is important in the news agenda that day while they passively consume it. And most respondents describe their TV news consumption as in-depth, actually more so than any other devices. So it's something they quite often just sit down and really get into. But TV now has an increasingly important role in inspiring deeper engagement with the news and further research. So tablets and increasingly mobiles are the devices used for further research of content first seen on TV. So the role of our TV news channel now is to stimulate interest in particular news stories, which viewers then go onto bbc.com, hopefully to satisfy. And obviously, a huge reason for TV's enduring presence in our living rooms is screen size. It simply enables a more social experience than is possible on other devices. So although news users increasingly recognise that linear TV will not always be the main TV platform, 2/3 believe that there will always be a TV-style screen for shared news consumption. But despite TV holding its own in terms of consumption, it is losing its value compared with digital, and this was the same in all 9 countries. If you could only choose one device to consume the news on, 2/3 would choose a digital device. And this rises to nearer 3/4 in developing markets. So you can see globally, 34%, if they could only choose one device, would pick TV and 19% mobile. But in South Africa, for example, 29% chose TV, 27% chose mobile. They're almost level. Okay, looking at the roles of digital devices, and I'll just quick look briefly at PCs and laptops. Respondents were really clear about their role. Their role is all about in-depth research, control and choice of what news stories are consumed in depth. This is a very practical approach. There was not much of an emotional connection with a laptop and how they use it. So as I've mentioned, digital devices are not killing off linear TV news yet. So tablet users are being more likely to use more TV now than previously, which really surprised us, as digital now gives it more, or gives it extra value. And in fact, our picture of the typical news consumer has shifted from individuals sitting down in front of the TV screen, being fully engaged with what they're watching on, say, the 10 o'clock news. Now, news is designed for the cross-platform consumer. TV sparking an interest in stories, and our digital platforms hopefully providing more detail on the stories that interest them, and increasingly importantly, encouraging them to spread the news to their own networks. Because compared with non-tablet users, those with tablets are 30% more likely to discuss news stories on blogs and equally more likely to share stories on social media amongst their own networks. And reassuringly from the BBC, over half of tablet users will only share a news story online after they've checked it with a professional news organisation because they want to protect their own reputations as opinion leaders within their own personal networks. So, smartphones and the news. Well, smartphones are predictably more likely to be used for reading news headlines, for quick checks and skimming than any other devices. And globally, respondents were checking news on their phone about 4 times a day, more so than on any other device. Portability and ease of use obviously have led to this style of news consumption, but there are signs that smartphones are moving beyond the rather superficial news consumption role that they have enjoyed to date. So our research showed that 41% of respondents now watch short news videos on their mobiles, and actually this figure is not far short of the proportion that watch on PCs and laptops. In fact, our Omniture analytics data for BBC Mobile shows that news video views have doubled over the last year and are now running about 2.5 million per month. So mobile has really come of age as a device for news consumption. And we clearly expect this to grow. Certainly, news consumption on mobile phones is increasing rapidly as the quality of what news organisations can deliver on them increases. Users overwhelmingly are using them more and expect this to continue. We found that usage patterns for smartphones were the same for tablet users and non-tablet users. I guess as the technical differences between the two types of devices lessens and they effectively merge as devices, that does make sense. One of the biggest surprises for us from this research was that consumers seem to pay as much attention to news on mobiles as they do on the TV or on PC. And it seems that there's a sense of urgency when they're looking for breaking news on mobiles compared with the laid-back, passive consumption of TV news. So the findings of this research have largely been used to drive a better cross-platform experience for BBC viewers and users, but it's also been used to help address an industry-wide issue that we're facing, that advertisers only pay 1/5 of the cost per thousand for a mobile ad as they would on desktop. And for us as a news organisation, that's a huge issue, because globally, audiences are moving from desktop to mobile. This has huge implications if we can't prove that mobile advertising works. So we're currently in the field through Millward Brown looking at how best to utilise mobile advertising to reach our affluent audiences. And I had hoped to share some of the insights from this with you today, but we're slightly behind on fieldwork. But this project itself has given us quite a lot of food for thought in this area. For example, consumers expect to see advertising on their mobile almost as much as they expect to see it on their TV. That's not to say that they want mobile advertising any more than they want TV advertising, but they are increasingly accepting it in return for free access to information and services. Yet many advertisers still think mobile advertising is a no-go area for them. And consumers do respond to mobile advertising in the news environment. 1 in 7 claim to have responded in some way in the last 4 weeks. And that's not as high as desktop or TV yet, but it's in the same ballpark. And I presume you've all seen figures like this before, the increase of second screen purchasing while watching TV. And this now includes mobile. But my point really of showing this is just to show that consumers seem to be adopting mobile, but advertisers are some years behind and need to catch up. Okay, well that's my moan about the advertising industry over. And I'll try to summarise Insights Consulting's 100+ slide debrief in this, my last slide. So it's clear in consumers' minds that each device has a very defined role to play, depending on many factors. And one of my colleagues, Emma, has a nice analogy to describe this. For consumers, the smartphone is a lot like Emma's handbag. She keeps it with her all the time and has a strong emotional connection to it. It has everything she needs to survive, but not necessarily everything she wants. And sometimes you need a little more, and that's where the tablet comes in, or in Emma's analogy, the luxury suitcase. But the Louis Vuitton is not always practical. Sometimes you need to go off the beaten track, and then only her rucksack will do. And this is how news consumers see a laptop or PC. It's the ability to go out and search for things you won't easily find with another device. It's a purely functional role. And lastly, you have your TV. It sits in the corner of the room, a constant, reassuring presence, stuffed full of information, but not always easy to search through. This is a lot like Emma's wardrobe, apparently. She knows what she wants will be in there somewhere, but finding it at the exact moment she wants it will be a challenge. Thank you, and enjoy your extra 15 minutes.